Here's the exact setup because it matters. The bit didn't come out of nowhere, it came out of a news segment. Kelly and Mark were talking through a real piece of proposed legislation, Pennsylvania's House Bill 97, which would change how pets are treated in divorce proceedings, formally recognizing them as family members rather than property. Kelly read some of the bill's language on air and turned the conversation toward the two of them, half joking, half genuinely curious. How would they ever divide custody of their own dog? That's when Mark, without much hesitation, said the now viral line, that he'd stay in a loveless marriage just to keep seeing Lena every day. Kelly didn't miss a beat. She fired back, "Is that all you're asking for, is a loveless marriage? Because that can be arranged." Done. The audience roared. Mark doubled down, saying if he ever lost custody of Lena, he'd lie awake at night wondering what she was doing, and Kelly needled him right back, joking he'd really be lying awake wondering if some other man was petting his dog. None of this reads as a real crisis, and that's exactly the point. Lena isn't a rival. She's a rescue. A Maltese and Shih Tzu mix the couple adopted back in March 2021 after she appeared, almost by accident, on a pet adoption segment on their own show. They weren't planning to take a dog home that day. They just fell for her on camera and that was that. Since then she's become something close to a recurring cast member on Live, popping up in bits, getting held up to the camera, becoming the butt of a running joke about Mark's borderline obsessive devotion to her. So when he jokes about staying married for the dog, the audience is in on the whole backstory. It isn't shocking. It's familiar. And that familiarity is exactly why the joke worked as well as it did. A newer couple or two people who just met could never pull this off without it landing as a genuine red flag. Mark and Kelly can say it because 30 years of relationship history is doing the work underneath the punchline, giving the audience permission to laugh instead of worry. Their comic chemistry has never been the soft, greeting card version of marriage. It's sharper than that. They interrupt each other mid-sentence. They call out each other's quirks on live television. They take things most couples would only argue about behind closed doors and turn them into a bit before the first commercial break. That's arguably become their actual brand as co-hosts. Not two people pretending everything's perfect, but two people comfortable enough to be a little unflattering about each other in public. What Mark's joke really exposed wasn't trouble. It was the fact that their marriage has aged past the point where every joke has to sound romantic to be safe. They can call it loveless as a bit precisely because nobody watching believes it for a second. Their story didn't start with a careful courtship. It started on a set, which in hindsight tracks. Mark and Kelly met filming All My Children. She was playing Haley Vaughn, he'd been cast as Mateo Santos, and their characters were written to fall for each other on screen. What wasn't scripted was what happened once the cameras stopped rolling. The two of them eloped to Las Vegas in 1996 and kept it under wraps for a while before going public. Their family expanded almost immediately after. Son Michael arrived in 1997, daughter Lola in 2001, and son Joaquin in 2003. In other words, there was no slow build, decade-long runway toward marriage and parenthood the way a lot of celebrity couples get to have. Mark and Kelly built a marriage, started a family, and stepped into fame more or less all at once, with barely any private years to sort themselves out before the public was watching. That timing mattered. Their relationship got stress-tested early, two careers pulling in different directions, young kids at home, and a level of scrutiny most newlyweds never have to deal with. Kelly went on to become one of the most consistent faces in morning television, first alongside Regis Philbin, then through a string of co-hosts and format changes that would have knocked a lot of shows off the air. Mark kept working steadily in film and TV. He later became widely known to a new generation of viewers as Hiram Lodge on Riverdale, while also being, in the public's eye, Kelly's husband. That kind of dynamic sinks a lot of marriages. One partner's spotlight becomes the whole gravitational center, and the other either fades into it or starts competing with it. Mark and Kelly seem to have avoided both. For years he stayed close enough to live to make the occasional guest appearance without ever needing the show to be the center of their marriage. Then in 2023 he took the plunge and became her full-time co-host, officially replacing Ryan Seacrest. That was a genuinely risky move, and it's worth taking seriously as one. Plenty of couples can barely agree on where to eat dinner without friction. Mark and Kelly signed up to sit next to each other on live national television every single weekday morning and let their marriage effectively become part of the format, without letting the format swallow the marriage whole. It's paid off in ways that go beyond ratings. The show has picked up daytime Emmy recognition since he joined, and their on-air rapport is frequently cited as the reason the format still works in a crowded morning landscape. But it also means every private joke, every bit of marital shorthand, now happens with an audience watching. Which is exactly why the Lena joke landed the way it did. They're not just married. They're married on camera 5 mornings a week. Snorts. So strip away the punchline, what did Mark actually admit? In his own joking, sideways way, he confirmed that their life together now runs on attachments that go a lot deeper than romance alone. That's not a tabloid bombshell. It's just the truth about what long marriages are actually made of. Early love runs on intensity. Long love runs on infrastructure. The dog, the grown kids, the house, the inside jokes nobody outside the marriage would even understand, the fights that got forgotten years ago but somehow still get referenced, the routines, the way one person can read the other's mood from across a room. When Mark jokes that he'd stay for Lena, Lena isn't really the subject. She's the stand-in for everything else holding the structure together. There's also a real transition underneath the joke. Their 3 kids are grown now. Michael is in his late 20s, Lola in her mid-20s, Joaquin in his early 20s, which means the daily scaffolding of parenting that used to organize their household is mostly gone. School runs, sports schedules, curfews, college applications. For 2 decades that stuff gave the marriage built-in structure. Once the kids move out, a couple has to face each other again without all that noise in between them. That stage can be genuinely disorienting for people, even happy people. For Mark and Kelly, Lena has clearly stepped into some of that space. She's become the household's designated object of fuss and affection, the empty nest baby, and the punchline of a running bit about custody battles that only works because it's pointing at something real. Their household has changed shape, and they've chosen to turn that change into comedy rather than let it sit there quietly. It's also worth noting this isn't the couple's first rodeo with pet grief on live television. In February 2025, they had to tell their audience that Chewy, the Shih Tzu Kelly adopted from a live pet segment back in 2007, and Lena's longtime housemate, had died at 17. Mark called it one of the hardest things they'd had to do together as a married couple, and Kelly was visibly emotional on air. That context adds real weight to the Lena joke. This isn't a couple treating a dog as a punchline out of nowhere. It's a couple who has already lived through losing one, and who understands exactly how much of their emotional life now runs through Lena. The joke is funny. The attachment underneath it is not exaggerated. Their public chemistry has never been the gentle, rehearsed kind. That's the whole reason it holds up. Some television couples perform sweetness so carefully that every compliment feels scripted and every laugh lands exactly where it's supposed to, pleasant but a little hollow. Mark and Kelly go the other direction. Their banter has actual edges to it. One line can carry 20 years of context that the audience only partly understands. A look between them can say silently, "We've had this exact fight before." A joke about a dog can spin into an entire bit because both of them trust the other to catch it and throw it back. That kind of teasing only works with real trust underneath it. Without trust, the same lines would just sound mean. With it, they become rhythm. Mark can make the Lena joke because he knows Kelly will catch it. Kelly can fire back about arranging a loveless marriage because she knows Mark can take it without flinching. None of it is improvised as much as it looks. It's built on years of timing and the shared confidence that the relationship is sturdy enough to survive the punchline. That's also, arguably, the whole appeal of the format now. Viewers aren't tuning in for a fantasy couple. They're tuning in for 2 people who seem genuinely, almost defiantly comfortable being a little annoyed with each other in public, which, let's be honest, is a lot more relatable than a highlight reel. Long marriages aren't a string of speeches. They're negotiations. Recurring jokes. Old grudges that eventually turn funny. Debates over the thermostat, the dishes, the dog who remembers a story correctly. Mark and Kelly have figured out how to convert that ordinary friction into performance without it curdling into something uncomfortable to watch. And that's a genuinely rare skill for 2 people to pull off together live 5 days a week. The Lena bit also tells you exactly where Mark and Kelly are in their life right now. All 3 of their kids are grown. For years, Kelly built a big part of her public persona around being a working mother juggling live television with school pickups and family chaos. It was practically a recurring theme of her hosting career. Mark, too, has talked plenty about fatherhood alongside his acting work. Now they're in a different chapter, and it's one that catches a lot of parents off guard. From the outside, an empty nest looks like pure freedom. No school runs, no teenage drama, more time, more quiet. From the inside, that quiet can feel unexpectedly confronting. Once the kids are out of the house, a couple discovers what's actually left between them once daily parenting stops being the glue. Some marriages struggle here, realizing they'd slowly turned into co-managers of a household rather than partners. Others use the space to reconnect. A lot do a bit of both. Mark and Kelly appear to have turned this particular stage into comedy rather than crisis. Lena has become the new fixation of the house. She gets fussed over, worried about, jokingly fought over on camera. It sounds absurd on its face, but it's also a genuinely common pattern. Plenty of parents pour extra affection into a pet once the kids move out, because the pet becomes proof that the house still has someone around to take care of. When Mark says he'd stay married for Lena, nobody actually thinks he's announcing a marital crisis. He's describing, almost by accident, the emotional shape of their house today. Their kids have their own lives now. He and Kelly still have each other. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a small rescue dog has become the household's tiny, self-appointed authority figure. So what exactly does the audience think it knows about this marriage? Mostly that Kelly Ripa is not an easy person to keep pace with, and Mark more or less confirms that every single morning he sits beside her. Kelly has spent decades doing live television, which demands a very specific kind of mental sharpness. Fast, controlled when she needs to be, unpredictable when the moment calls for it, and remarkably good at spinning ordinary domestic material into something genuinely entertaining. That's much harder than it looks from the couch. Live hosting only seems casual, the casualness is the craft. She has to fill dead air, react instantly, manage pacing, protect the rhythm of a live broadcast, and keep a segment moving without ever letting it feel like effort. And she's done that across co-host changes, format shifts, public scrutiny, and health setbacks, her extended absence in August 2025 for oral surgery being a recent example, for the better part of 2.5 decades. Mark married that person before the world fully understood what she'd become. That's an important detail people gloss over. He didn't marry Kelly Ripa, daytime TV institution. He married Kelly from All My Children, a young actress he happened to fall for on set. He then watched in real time as she turned into a media force in her own right. For a lot of husbands, that kind of imbalance in public profile becomes a quiet source of resentment. For Mark, it seems to have become part of how the partnership functions instead. But living with someone whose instincts and precision can dominate a room is still a real thing to navigate, and what people suspect, rightly it seems, is that Kelly is funny but never passive, warm but never soft, charming but not exactly easy to manage. Mark's version of handling that isn't control. It's participation. He plays off her energy, pushes back when it's funny to push back, lets her take the lead when she's clearly better positioned in the moment, then finds his own lane. A lot of celebrity marriages buckle under exactly this kind of dynamic. 2 public careers, 2 egos, 2 competing schedules. Mark and Kelly appear to have figured out, over 3 decades, when to compete and when to just be a team, and their live TV partnership is basically that lesson performed in real time every weekday morning. Their relationship has always had an odd, almost circular public shape to it. They met at work. They played on-screen lovers before they were a real couple. They eloped fast and quiet. They became parents young. They built separate careers for years. And then, decades later, they ended up back where they started, working side by side in front of an audience, except this time the romance was real and the audience already knew the whole history. That's not a typical trajectory for a marriage. Most couples get more private as they age. Mark and Kelly somehow moved the opposite direction, becoming more publicly intertwined the longer they stayed together. That backstory is exactly why the marriage doesn't feel manufactured for ratings, even though it's now central to a hit daytime show. Audiences are generally very good at smelling fake chemistry. They can tell when 2 people have simply been placed next to each other and told to act comfortable. Mark and Kelly have almost the opposite issue. They're so genuinely comfortable that they sometimes say things blunt enough to make headlines by themselves. Mark jokes he'd stay in a loveless marriage for the dog. Kelly volleys back. A morning show bit turns into a viral story by that afternoon. But nobody's actually clicking because they believe divorce is imminent. They're clicking because the line offers a small, honest window into how unusual this marriage has become. Part home life, part workplace, part comedy act, part 3-decade partnership, all happening on the same set at the same time. Mark's joke frames Lena as the reason he'd stay married. The real reason is obviously bigger than one dog. This marriage is now family history, shared work, 3 grown children, decades of private memories nobody outside the house will ever fully understand, and a partnership that's survived enough phases of life that walking away would mean dismantling almost everything both of them have built. That's not the same as being trapped. It just means the roots go deep. People tend to misjudge long marriages by asking whether a couple is still in love, as though love is supposed to feel identical after 30 years as it did after 3 months. It isn't, and it was never going to be. Long marriage isn't one feeling on repeat. It changes shape constantly. Sometimes it looks like desire, sometimes friendship, sometimes plain loyalty, sometimes irritation, sometimes just teamwork, sometimes simply remembering who actually showed up during the hard stretches. And sometimes, apparently, it looks like bantering about custody of a rescue dog on live television, because that dog has genuinely become part of the household's emotional center. Mark and Kelly have been through enough public life together to know romance by itself was never going to be a long-term plan. What their marriage has actually needed is flexibility, humor, forgiveness, routine, reinvention, and a willingness to let each other change without treating that change as some kind of betrayal. That's the real thing Mark's joke revealed. Not that the marriage lacks love, but that it doesn't depend on any single perfect feeling to keep going. A brand new couple might genuinely panic at the phrase, loveless marriage. Mark and Kelly can turn it into a punchline because their bond has already survived far worse tests than a joke. The most interesting thing about Mark and Kelly might be that they've never really tried to sell perfection, and that's a compliment, not a flaw. Their public marriage feels durable specifically because it doesn't sound polished within an inch of its life. Kelly can be intense on air. Mark can be blunt to the point of oversharing. They compete, they rib each other, they occasionally make each other the punchline in front of millions of people. Sometimes viewers cringe a little. Sometimes they laugh. Often it's both at once, and that messiness is a real part of the appeal. They come across as married, not as branded. A branded couple recites the same polished origin story every time. How they met, how they fell in love, how communication keeps everything strong. It might all be true, but it starts sounding rehearsed fast. Mark and Kelly offer something rougher around the edges. Two people who've genuinely lived a lot of life inside the same house, complete with sweet moments, petty ones, loyalty, eye rolls, exhaustion, the occasional grand anniversary reflection, and plenty of tiny disputes about nothing in particular. That's the version of marriage most people actually recognize in their own lives. Not the fantasy, but the daily, ongoing thing that survives because both people keep choosing to return to it. 30 years in, their relationship isn't really about whether they can still generate excitement on demand. It's about whether they can stay connected while everything around them keeps changing shape. Kids grow up, careers shift, parents age, houses get quieter, public attention comes in waves and recedes again. A couple either adapts to that or slowly turns into strangers who happen to share an address. Mark and Kelly seem to have adapted by turning the marriage itself into an ongoing conversation, sometimes affectionate, sometimes sarcastic, occasionally, as with the lean a bit, accidental national entertainment. But underneath all of it, they're still talking to each other on camera and off. That, more than any single joke about a dog, might be the actual secret to how they've lasted this long. Mark Consuelos didn't quietly confess that his marriage to Kelly Ripa is secretly loveless. He revealed something far more honest than that after nearly 30 years what holds their marriage together is humor, family, routine, loyalty, a shared history that started on a soap opera set, and yes, one extremely powerful rescue dog named Lena. Like this video, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment. What do you think is really keeping Mark and Kelly together after all these years?